Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. I am Father Chris and this is WV Priest. In this video, we are going to ask and try to answer, or begin to answer the question, why do we play games? In the classic Vsauce video, Why Do We Play Games?, Michael, or Vsauce, looks to psychology and evolutionary biology or theory, social psychology to answer this question, why do we play games, along with many other anecdotal questions in typical Vsauce fashion. I encourage you, if you haven't watched Vsauce before, I put a link in the description to that video. Check him out. He's a really thoughtful analyzer and thinker, and so check out that video. Vsauce highlights the importance of playing by the rules and the catharsis of completion, of finishing. In real life, the rules of the game of life can often be hard to define. In real life, we don't often get to win, to feel the satisfaction of finishing, of completion. So, psychologically speaking, games and sports allow us to feel the resolution, win or lose, that often eludes us in real life. And this is good. Stories do this too. Books, movies, anything with characters and a plot, they allow us to feel the catharsis of resolution. We can win. We can experience the end, completion of the story. So this is something that's similar about games and sports to stories. We can complete something. We can feel the satisfaction of finishing. So this week and next week, I want to follow up on Vsauce's wonderful analysis and answer two follow-up questions. So this week, one, I want to look at, are there real universal rules for the game of life? Are there real rules, real standards, universal rules for the game of life? And then secondly, and next week, should we play games? Not just why do we play games, but should we play games? Should we watch sports? Should we root for our favorite team? So we're going to look at that next week. So this week we'll answer the question, in the game of life, are there any rules that we can live by and even play the game at all? So firstly, are there real universal rules for the game of life? During World War II, C.S. Lewis gave a series of lectures on natural law, or the natural law, at King's College, and this was later published in the book The Abolition of Man. Now, Lewis makes a compelling case for a standard of authority outside ourselves that all people in all places throughout all time live by. And this is classically called the natural law. In the appendix to The Abolition of Man, at the end of this book, Lewis lists hundreds of primary source examples for the natural law. What Hindus call Rita, what Plato called the good, what Jews and Christians call the law, what the Chinese call the Tao, a standard for living, the rules for the game of life, a standard outside of ourselves. Michael Ward, in his excellent book on the abolition of man called After Humanity, is a really good book. He summarizes it well. He summarizes it like this: Plato, Aristotle, Horace, Jesus, St. Paul, Locke, Shelley, and many others, a diverse chorus of voices indicating that the human family is a real family with certain core values in common. It is something of a melee at times, like any family, but still it is united at the root. Now, the reason Lewis wrote these lectures in 1943 in wartime Britain, and the reason why it is increasingly relevant for us today, is that we modern people, not people out there, but me and us, modern people, have shifted the location for meaning from outside ourselves to inside ourselves. We modern people in the West don't think we live in a polytheistic culture, cultures like ancient Greece where there are many gods. That's what we say, but the reality is that the center of meaning has shifted in our day and in our place to each individual person. So, you could say, in America alone, there are 328 million gods. Each person defines the rules by which they play life, the rules for life for themselves. Who defines the rules for life? Today, it is unassailably true that each individual gets to define for themselves what is right and wrong. There is no standard of authority outside of me, myself, and I. And this self-centered reality makes playing the game of life really hard because we're all playing by different rules. In Carl Trueman's recent book, The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self, it's a really good book, Trueman shows how Lewis's argument has come true today. Today, people say, I am a woman trapped in a man's body, and many other statements like this. In other words, there is no standard outside of me that humans live by, that defines them, that constrains them. Each individual defines everything for themselves, even their own gender, and nobody can say anything at all to me. I get to define for myself. This is true of conservatives and progressives, secular people and religious people. I am a born-again, self-defining libertarian. You can't tell me what to do. You can't tell me what to do with my guns or my religion. That's a pretty familiar story. I am a self-defined, self-medicated progressive. You can't tell me what to do. You can't tell me what to do with my body. This is another common story, and it's the same story for all of us in this day, in this time, in this place. The center for meaning, the rules of the game, are each individually defined. So all of this relates to what Vsauce talked about as the game of life in profound ways. Nobody knows what the rules are anymore, so nobody wants to play. Every conversation, every person has a different set of rules. Therefore, our social institutions become more and more insular, smaller and smaller groups of people playing smaller and smaller games where rules become more and more individual by the moment. This is the tribalism and the separation and the loneliness of our day. Again, Michael Ward summarizes it well in After Humanity. In the rational desert of our modern self-defined world, the only way people can effect social or political or legislative change is to mobilize a sufficiently large contingent of like-minded protesters. And these are smaller and smaller groups of people who play by the same rules. They organize in a contingent of like-minded protesters, and they out-protest their opponents. The question of truth, an authority outside of ourselves, as such, is relegated to a second or else a third order issue. The real question is one of power, and thus we arrive at our post-truth world. We don't have any rules for the game of life, and so we gather in increasingly smaller groups of people who think just like me. We walk onto the field of the game of life and we punch you in the nose. We take the ball. We kick that ball on the roof and say, I'm going home. Or else we, with a force of power, we kick it into the goal. And this is how we play today. The game of life played like this is no fun at all. So again, circling back to our original question, are there real rules for the game of life? Real universal rules outside of myself that we can play by? And yes, I believe that there are. As a Christian, I would define the rules for life as the law of the Lord, or as the Apostle Paul calls it, the law of Christ, which is written on the hearts of all men. The psalmist says that this law, when received in its proper place with humility, this law of the Lord revives the soul. It gives us rules to play the game of life, to call fouls on people when they break the rules. A game without rules is no fun, because people are self-centered, self-focused, whereas the scriptures say they're sinful, in rebellion against a loving and holy God. They want to win at all costs. And because of this, the game of life can be very often a pretty crappy game to play. Without agreed upon rules to play the game of life, what philosophers call the natural law, again, what Hindus call the Rita, or the Chinese call the Tao, or as Jewish and Christian people reflect in the law, or the law of the Lord. Without this standard outside ourselves, we can't even play the game. A house without rules is a terrible place to live. A game played without agreed upon rules is not a fun game. And a life lived with self-defined morality is ultimately a very secluded and lonely place. There are rules for living that all humans need. And because of our selfishness and sin, we need good rules to play the game, or it's not fun. And the better the rules, the more fun we can have in the game of life. So why do we play games? Well, first we have to have rules to play the game. And next week, I want to talk about why we play games and really answer the question, should we play games? Are games and sports and being a fan of my team, is that ultimately good for us? So I hope you'll join me next week as we further answer this question. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. If you have any comments or questions, please put those in the comments below. Subscribe and like the channel if you like this and you want to see more content like this. God bless you and have a great week.